Good evening, everyone. I, Mohit Saluja, on behalf of International Conference ICHT 2020, welcome two of the eminent speakers from India, Kolkata, West Bengal. We have two eminent speakers, one Mr. Saurabh Datta Gupta and the second one is Dr. Nandi. They will be delivering on various topics. So first half of the session is allotted to Mr. Saurabh Datta Gupta, who is a company secretary in West Bengal Housing Infrastructure Development Corporation, Kolkata. However, on reading his profile, we have come to know that he's very interested in traveling, and he has also an avid traveler and has also traveled 25 countries across the world and 4 continents. His travel have taken him to the wilderness areas of Eastern Africa and South America, as also the nooks and crannies of India. He is a backpacker in spirit who doesn't just roam around and stay in hotels, but he is fond of speaking to people in various languages and communicating them and staying in the different places of the person's house instead of going to hotels. Now, finally, he aims to stay at 150, visit 150 countries in his lifetime. So basically, Mr. Saurabh will be starting with the topic stock market and the impact of COVID-19 on stock market. Sir, over to you.
Saurav, I think two of your systems are mute one. Maybe Mahua's system is on. You have to mute that.
Yeah, I'm doing that.
Yeah.
Actually, in her system, the picture quality is better, so I was trying to do that, but get some problem. Anyway.
Yeah. Yeah, you can do that, no problem.
Let me start. Let me share the screen first. 1 second. I'm trying to share the screen. Just 1 second. Hold on. Right? Spotlight. I'm trying to share a screen. Just 1 second. I'm sharing this for the first time, so let's hope there is no problem.
Maybe someone from the admin can help him.
Yeah, I think
So there's an option of share screen. You can click on that.
Yeah. Is it visible now?
Yes, yes.
Yes, sir.
Okay, that's great. I'm visible, right?
Yes.
Ah, so my topic is disconnect between the stock market and versus the real economy, the conundrum. So, so I will be throwing some interesting thoughts, the link between the stock market and real economy, and um, how sustainable tourism is relevant in this scenario. So let me start with uh, first slide. And we all know that capital market is normally a proxy for the economy. So, so ideally it should be mimic the economy. The economy is doing well, the capital market, the stock market should be doing well. And if the economy is not doing well, the stock market should not be doing well. That is the basic theory. And typically, GDP of a country and the market capitalization of all companies in the stock market are positively correlated. Market capitalization means market value of all the stocks in the market. If you add all the stocks in the market and you add them, so that is the market capitalization of all the companies. So normally the GDP and market capitalization are positively correlated. And in any country like say US, it's 140. US capital market is 148 and GDP is 100. In Australia, Australian market is 107 and GDP is 100. In Canada, the Canada stock market is 113 and the GDP is 100. So you can see there's a very positive correlation. And in India, the ratio is 70%. So we can say that generally the GDP of a country and the stock market capitalization are positively correlated. And as our economy becomes more matured, is closely mimic. So, so let's see how Indian market has grown. Indian market was 30.6 billion US dollar in at the time of independence. Now it is 3,000 billion. That is 100 times. 100 times in 73 years. But market has gone up 100 times. But the market has gone up 100 times between 1992 and 2020. So in 20 years, the market has grown 100 times. Whereas the Indian economy, that is the GDP, has gone up 100 times in 70 years. So it is
No.
that the am I audible? Hello, am I audible?
Saurav, you're audible, but can you be a little louder? That will be better.
Okay. Should I repeat from the beginning or is it okay? So what I have said is
No, you don't have to. You don't have to repeat. We have heard everything, but we have to give an effort. So if you are louder, it's easier.
sure. Please tell me if it needs to be further louder. Okay. So the Indian economy was 30.6 billion at the time of independence in 1947, and the economy or GDP has grown 100 times, right? 100 times. It has become 3,000 billion. So 73 years, Indian economy has grown 100 times. But the market has gone up 100 times in 28 years between 1992 and 2020. So the market has outperformed. So what the economy has done in 73 years, the market has done it in last 28 years. So the market has outperformed the real economy more than much more. It has outperformed the real economy much more than the real economy. And interestingly, Indian market is very expensive at the moment. What is the parameter for expensive? There are various parameters. One of the most important parameters is price earning ratio. When somebody says, oh, India's market is very expensive, that doesn't mean 42,000 Sensex, 30,000 Sensex, 35,000 Sensex. Basically what they are talking about, how many times the market is the earning per share of the index companies. To make it simpler, price earning ratio is the barometer. It's often said price earning ratio is the barometer for the expensiveness of a stock market. So by using that parameter, Indian market is 100 times more expensive than Chinese stock market, and around 50 times more expensive than US, right? So already Indian economy is has done well, and it has shown in the stock market valuation, right? Okay. So before we talk about real economy, we have to understand the constituents of the real economy. So what is the constituent economy? Industrial sector contributes 23% of the GDP, 23%, and it employs roughly 23% of the workforce. Agricultural sector contributes 14% of the economy, but employs 4 times, that is 54% of the economy. But the most important sector is the service sector. In India, now India is more or less aligned to rest of the world, rest of the developed countries. Now service sector contributes 63% of the GDP. So, and it employs 23%. So service sector plays the most important role in our economy. Probably we all know this. And we also need to understand how individuals are doing at the moment. The per capita income in India is only $2,300, $2,300 US dollar per capita at the moment. Per capita means per annum, which comes to around something like 1,55,000. So the per capita income of an average individual is only $1,02,300, and on PPP term, that is purchasing power parity, it is 4 times. But if we consider the median income means the middlemost income, because in this 2,300, the income of Mukesh Ambani and a pauper is added together, so it doesn't give the proper picture. So ideally, we should look at the median salary, median income. Unfortunately, there is no statistics for median salary, median income. So median income is even lower because median income doesn't take into account the extreme level of income and extreme poor level of income, like a pauper and the richest man in India. So so India is really a poor country if we consider the per capita income of only 2,300. Compared to that, US is 55,000, Italy is 35,000. Most of the West European countries are around 50,000, whereas India is 2,300. That is 1/20th of what is there in US. So India has a lot of, it has to catch up a lot. So it's nowhere near Europe or US. But if you consider purchasing power parity, because goods are really cheap in India compared to other parts of India, other parts of the world. So if you consider purchasing power parity, then we are slightly better. We are slightly better. But the problem lies in the 7th slide. What is the problem? That is the size of India's middle class. Am I audible, right? Is it better than previously?
Yes, sir. Better.
Size of India's middle class is only 1 crore. Contrary to what people think as 30 crore, 40 crore. The size of India's middle class is 10 million. Since some international audience is there, so I will talk about million, not only crore, because they won't be understanding. The size of India's middle class is 10 million out of a population of 1340 million. So only 10 million Indians are middle class. And what is middle class? By middle class, I have taken a definition whose income is more than 50,000. And this figure I have taken from Finance Minister's budget. This is not any cock and bull story. This is India's middle class, 10 million, 1 crore. 1 crore is India's middle class. And only 35 million people in India earns more than 20,000 rupees per month. 20,000 rupees means around $280 per month. So only 35 million people in India out of a population of 1340, or 35 million or 3.5 crore people in India earns more than $280 per month. So this is the size of India's middle class. If you consider 20,000 per month or $280 as a lower middle class, so lower middle class till the uppermost middle class, the size is 35 million. No wonder 800 million or 80 crore of the poorest of the poor got ration during this government, during this recession. During this pandemic, government has given ration to 80 crore of the poorest of the poor. That is 800 million people have been given ration. And mind it, my house help didn't get that ration card because of some documentation problem. I've asked my driver, even he hasn't got the ration because of some documentation problem. So officially 80 crores or 800 million is India's poorest of the poor. This is not my figure. This is the figure given in the newspaper during the pandemic. So 800 million people were given ration during this pandemic. No wonder that we have a very high Gini coefficient. Gini coefficient is the inequality ratio, you can say. As per Piketty, famous economist Thomas Piketty, the Gini coefficient is somewhere between 41 to 49. It is very high compared to other European countries. But if this is to change, if the poor and the middle and the lower middle class has to be uplifted, the most important role is to be played by the service sector, which contributes 63%. So if this 63% of the economy doesn't play its role, then we cannot do anything. So when we are talking about e-way bill, in the newspaper it is coming that there are some green shoots which are appearing. Some green shoots are appearing. Why green shoots are appearing? Because e-way bill, that is movement of goods between one state to another, they are around 70% of pre-COVID level, which shows that goods are moving at 80% level. But goods means industrial sector. Industrial sector means 23% of the economy. What about 63%? So if we have to we have to reach to a higher level, to a next level, then the service sector, which contributes 63%. So if we only concentrate about 23% of industrial sector, that is what is the headline news in newspaper, that manufacturing has gone down, this and that. But manufacturing and but agriculture is thankfully doing well. The monsoon is good, but the manufacturing sector is not doing well. But manufacturing is slightly becoming better. But what about service sector? Service sector has the real potential to uplift India to the lower of the people in the lower pyramid. So that only the service sector can do that. But thankfully, in spite of such poverty, India is not facing food shortage. Why? Because while India's population has gone up 4 times since independence, India's food production has gone up 5 times. While population has gone up 4 times, food production has gone up 5 times. That is why there is no food shortage in spite of such poverty. Number one. Number two, empirical result will show that price of, we always hear when our grandparents or father parents say things were cheaper in olden days. That is completely misnomer. That is completely incorrect. The price is to salary was much higher previously. Price is to salary. In 1950, my mother used to buy a chicken for 5 rupees, 4 rupees a kg, when the salary was 100 rupees. So a chicken is to salary was 1 by 25th. Now it is, the difference is much more, it's much cheaper. So the price of goods, price of vegetables, price of chicken has gone down like anything in last 73 years. So although we have become, although India is not poor, not rich, really poor, but still people are surviving. Even today, if you go to Delhi, if you go to a street side stall, roadside stall, and get rajma chawal or kidney bean curry and rice for 50 cents. Even in Delhi, even in Mumbai, I had pav bhaji from a stall, roadside stall for 20 rupees. 20 rupees, even in Mumbai, near city, Churchgate, if I'm not mistaken. And in Kolkata, you can have same thing for 40 cents. You can have a egg meal. Why? Because of the huge economy of scale. This is where India's population is of great help. Because of such a huge population, we have a great economy of scale. Nowhere in the world except China there is such a great economy of scale. The mobile rates, mobile phones, we pay only $2 for 1 month for unlimited talk time and reasonable data. $2 per month. So because of this economy of scale, I have traveled extensively around the world. I have seen nowhere in the world things are cheaper than India. That is not because of we have done great things, because of our population. Our population has helped in this way that since the population is huge, even if you earn $2 per person, so $2 per person into 1.34 billion, so which comes to 264 billion per month. So that is why, although India is poor, but because of this huge population benefit we are having, we have been able to be the lowest cost producer of anything and everything. So that's why things are so cheap in India. And we must also remember that India's GDP was 25% of the world economy in 1700. we used to contribute 25% of the world GDP in 1700. Now we contribute less than 2%. In purchasing power, parity is more, but all over the world, people consider the nominal value, not the purchasing power parity theory. So we contribute only 2% of the world GDP today, and it was 25% in 1700. So as I was telling you, 99% of the Indian population earns less than 700 US dollar per month. 700 US dollar per month. So for egalitarian society to evolve, there is no other option but a robust service sector. Unless service sector grows, we will never be able to reach the next level. And let's talk about our financial sector, stock market. Every day we are reading in the newspaper that 150 million people are investing in mutual fund. That is hogwash, because a person, many people are having 4, 5, 6, 7 folios. So if you consider 7 folios for one, is that 7 investors but 1 investor? In India, there is only 20 million investors. In other words, only 2% of the Indian population invests in mutual fund. Sorry, only 2% of the investors invest in mutual fund. Less than 2%, much less than, not 2%, much, actually 1.5% of India's population invest in mutual fund. There are 150 million folios, 15 crore folios, but not 15 crore investors, only 2%. And there are only 3% of Indian population who is investing directly in stock market, 3%. But this out of this 3%, only 25% is serious investor. Rest are fringe players or an inactive investor, probably who has invested once. Maybe he will invest after 3 years or 2 years, or they have purchased telco 30 years back, like that. So only 2% of India's population invests in mutual fund, and 3% of India's population invests directly in stock market. But the point is, serious player is only 25%, according to my calculation. There is no official calculation. There is no official record of what is the out from my experience of investing in the market, interacting with a lot of people for last 20 years. I can tell you only 25%, even less than 25%, is serious investor. So the stock market is benefiting the FII. So we always say it is a foreign institutional investor the money. There are some domestic institutional investors also who are making money, but retail investors by and large are not getting any benefit from the market. In US, more than 50% of the people are investing in mutual fund, but in India, 2%, and out of the 2%, 25% is the real investor, 75% is inactive fringe players. So as I was telling you in the previous slide, the green shoot which we have seen is only in the industrial sector, and that is shown by e-way bill. That is only 23% economy. So we should look into the service sector, not industrial sector. Although government is talking about Atmanirbhar India, fine, that is good. I'm all for it. But unless service sector grows, India will never grow. And that is the trend all over the world. In any major European country, in any major countries in the world, is a service sector which contributes 60%, 70%, 80%, 85%. In Singapore, it is even more than that. Anyway.
Sir, just to intervene in between, you have 5 more minutes to complete your sessions.
Sure. It's almost. So now let's come to the tourism sector. The number of people employed in tourism sector is 40 million. which is at least 3 times more than IT sector. When IT sector, when Infosys or TCS of the world is doing well, we see it in headlines of newspaper. But they contribute much less to the GDP compared to tourism, and the employment capability in IT sector is also much less. So tourism contributes 3 times more than IT sector, and it contributes 50% more to the GDP than IT sector. Now, a very important statistics, very interesting statistics. In France, for every 1 citizen, there is 1 foreign tourist. For 1 citizen, there is 1 foreign tourist. In India, for 1 foreign tourist, there are 134 citizens. So ratio is to 1:1 in France, and India is 1:134. So can you imagine, for every 1 tourist, foreign tourist, there is 1 citizen in France. So every tourist is contributing, for every citizen there is 1 tourist, and India, for every 134 tourists, 134 citizens, there is 1 tourist. So we have a huge potential in this segment. So unless government looks into this segment, of course there are some other segments also, since we are talking about sustainable tourism, and the tourism sector has also changed like anything in last 10 years. So now there is e-visa, which is a very important thing which government of India has done, but it needs to be further relaxed. Airbnb needs to be encouraged from the government level. I asked a person from Greece that how the government is encouraging Airbnb. Why? Because in India, government is doing every possible way to obstruct Airbnb, where the other private players are really doing badly. They are not giving. Then road infrastructure near the tourist hotspots needs to be upgraded. Logistics in tourist hotspots needs to be improved by leaps and bounds. And a rating system needs to be introduced by Government of India. So this is my last slide. So I would say that although SEBI has played a very commendable role in regulation of capital market, alas, it has benefited very few people. It has benefited very few people, less than 1%. So it is tourism which can be a real money spinner for the masses, and sustainable tourism is becoming more and more relevant. Now people are interested in the experience rather than the visual effect because of YouTube and all this Instagram. So people have seen things 100 times before they are coming to India. But experience is something which you have to perceive when you come to India. So I think sustainable tourism has a very, very major role to play in India, and other segments, they're important. I'm not saying they are not important, but the importance of tourism cannot be expressed more in these trying times. I hope this pandemic will be over in 6 months' time, but we have to understand that we have not been able to do justice to the tourism sector, or rather sustainable tourism. So that is the way forward. That is it. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Saurabh sir, for enlightening us
Thank you
with
so
the
much, sir.
economic scenario of the country vis-a-vis the capital structures and everything. Sir, to just end up your session, I have a small question to you. Does the economic relief packages that are being announced by the government really helpful in practical aspects to the economy? And what according to you should be the views of the government pumping up the capital in the field of tourism? as you said that, focusing on tourism is very important aspect as far as economic development is concerned. What are your views on government's incentives coming up for the tourism packages and other things?
As far as my knowledge goes, government has hardly done anything. Not this government. I'm talking about for last 73 years, not talking about this government. Nobody has thought enough of tourism, right? So if you go to, when we go outside India, the experience is so much different. Why I go to why I go outside India at least twice a year? Because the experience is amazing. The experience is amazing. The facilities are amazing. In India, unfortunately, government has not thought about this. I think the infrastructure has to be hugely upgraded. Hugely upgraded. I went to Rajasthan last year. When I went to Rajasthan, I had high hopes because Rajasthan is the most important state as far as tourism is concerned. I have traveled length and breadth of Rajasthan and also in Gujarat, by the way. I've been to the houses of the artisans, rural artisans. Okay, people talk about good roads in Gujarat. If you go to the roads, if you take the roads which leads you to the artisans' house, the roads are really bad even in Gujarat. Highways are good, but if you go to the tourist spots, they are not good. So same is true for Rajasthan. I was highly disappointed. I thought in West Bengal we are not doing good enough, but in Rajasthan, in Bundi, in Udaipur, in Jodhpur, the roads are really bad, really bad. So, government must think about this. They should seriously send people to places like Turkey. They should send places like Vietnam. They should send people to even Cambodia, Laos. So,
Sir, we have one more question coming up from Mr. Debashish Acharya.
Sir,
Is that satisfying growth in India economy as per the current world scenario? Is the economic growth in India satisfying vis-a-vis the growth of world scenario?
let me be candid. Even a few years back, in fact, there are two schools of thought. One is Jagdish Bhagwati school of thought that if GDP grows, then it will lift the economy, right? So I was of that school of thought that if the GDP grows, economy will grow. It will uplift all the segments. But when I started studying about this India's middle class, in fact, I've written an article on this, the size of India's middle class. I've done extensive research on India's middle class. And when I learned, when I've researched this India's middle class after so much discussion and all this is 10 million, 1 crore, then I understood that something more is to be done. Something more is to be done. Just GDP growth will only make us richer, right? We are the beneficiaries. We are the beneficiaries of all the good things government is doing. But something has to be done for the bottom of the pyramid. For the bottom of the pyramid, for last 73 years, is almost the same.
Sir, one last question we have from Dr. Nandi. He quotes Indian economic growth, a pocketed growth. How do you justify or unjustify the statement?
Absolutely, absolutely. That is what I was trying to say. That is, see, in a country of 1340 million, 1340 million, only 5 million people are actually investing properly, right? And officially the figure is 10 million. Officially the figure is 40 million, but real figure is actually 50, not even 10 million, right? So it's pocketed growth, that is correct. In fact, if you really study the facts and figures, this is not what I am talking. I can give you hundreds of statistics which will tell you it's very few people who are actually gaining. I have hundreds of statistics. I am not saying anything without
Thank
fact.
you, sir. Thank you so much for enlightening us on the topic allotted to you. Since time is a constraint here, sir, we have to shift to our new speaker, and I would request Priyanka to introduce Dr. Nandi to all the viewers today.
Mohit, did you say something to me?
No, sir. I have just asked Priyanka to introduce you and read your profile for the
Okay,
viewers.
Priyanka, welcome. Please go ahead.
Yes, sir. Now I request the second speaker of the session, Dr. Nandi, to share his experience on this topic, renewable and sustainable energy. And I would like to introduce Dr. Paritosh Nandi. He is the director of Enward Group of Companies based in Kolkata, India. And he is also a PhD in solar engineering, a certified energy manager and certified energy auditor by the Ministry of Power, Government of India. He has authored several publications in scientific journals, conference proceedings, and technical reports. So I welcome him to the international conference ICST 2020. So, sir, you can take over, sir.
Priyanka, thank you so much. Mohit, thank you so much. I must congratulate Team Curiosity and all the respected speakers and the participants. I start by saying that this is one of a kind conference. This time we have got participants from Poland and the speakers and the panelists from Poland and maybe another 20-30 countries that our editor, Ms. Supanjana, they will be knowing. And first of all, the expertise, the field of expertise is on renewable energy with respect to my own domain knowledge. So therefore, instead of going to tourism or other sustainability issues, I must focus on this particular segment. So I'll start sharing my screen now. So how to do it, because we are all learning on this particular.
So there's an option of share screen. You can click on that.
Okay, share screen. So I just, okay. So my presentation will be based on the three topics. One is energy management and energy audit. Probably we'll be knowing the sustainable energy, and there are lots of things on sustainability has been said, starting from that our common future and the Brundtland report. That's a long history, maybe 30 years history for any science or technology that matures. Not science, I'm saying technology that matures. It takes almost 25 to 30 years. Like this way, the solar energy, so far whatever we are seeing in India now, that's a tremendous effort, tremendous research efforts by the Indian scientists or as a maybe the international communities as a whole. So now I'll be talking on this Indian energy renewable energy deployment and the scenarios. The first of all, the presentation will cover on energy management and audit issues, how energy management and audit issues come. In India, I guess, yes, the first fuel policy committee in India was set up maybe in 1970, even before the first oil shock. Our planning commission member, Professor Sukhmoy Chakraborty, was there. So he set up a committee on fuel policy committee. So that was the first time the Indian government thought about the losses of energy, the unwanted losses of energy. That's later on over the years, maybe 30 years or so, it took in 2001 finally the government of India passed the Energy Conservation Act, and proudly we said EC Act of 2001. So this is a long history there. Maybe the historical reports are there. It will be of your interest. Maybe when you get time, or if you are from this field, you can do a little bit of research. In 1970, Fuel Committee was set up. Thereafter, the publication of Limits to Growth by Club of Rome. These are all coincidental things. Then UN Conference on Human Environment in Stockholm, and thereafter the first oil shock in 1973. So what I said, that India thought before even the first oil shock, when most of the developed countries were unable to fathom that there is a kind of requirement of energy efficiency or something like that. So, and in 1978, in the background of the first oil shock and this this PCRA was, this is Petroleum Conservation Action Research Association by Government of India, and thereafter in 1979 second oil shock, and this is the long history. Thereafter two states in 1995, Kerala and West Bengal, they started, maybe because of the similar governments were there, they started in 1992. Kerala government started the mandatory energy audit for the industries. And 1996, the government of India started, government of West Bengal, they started energy conservation, new drafts of energy conservation bills. So in 2001, finally, government of India set up an act, that is an EC Act, in 2001. And thereafter, probably the people from CS and lawyer community, you will be knowing there is a body who looks up the act, that's called statutory body, and thereafter the government of India set up the BEE, Bureau of Energy Efficiency. So Bureau of Energy Efficiency, and they looked up, that was set up in 2002, and firstly they set up the energy auditor, likewise you pass your CS exam or CA exam, whatever, and they started doing this energy auditor examination. There are 4 papers. Those who can qualify the 3-4 papers, they will be certified energy auditor. And that's likewise the same way. After some years of experience, they will be accredited energy auditors or something like that. But it was very slow. But the governmental willingness has really worked out, and there are so many energy auditors. Like in any industrial energy audit, you just Google search, you will get the BE website, and there are individual consultant maybe who are qualified for this in this examination of energy audit. And the background was in 2008 when the UPA government was there. The government took 8, and that is called NAPCC. I said National Action Plan on Climate Change. There was with this NAPCC, there are 8 action plans, like National Solar Mission. Later on, they named it Jawaharlal Nehru National Solar Mission. Again, that has been changed, I know. A National Mission for NME. And in order to look after this National Mission on Energy Efficiency, you have probably heard the name of EESL, Energy Efficiency Service Limited, and also National Mission of Sustainable Habitats for these prime ministers. They have clubbed with maybe prime ministers, Abasan, Jojona, or something like that. National Mission for Sustaining Himalayan Ecosystem. This is the new one. National Mission for Green India and National Mission for Sustainable Agriculture. And also another 2-3 missions have been added to this. You can update on this. And my next slide, Priyanka and Mohit, I must say that this is the last session of the day. And for the physical session, the last speaker is the most unimportant speaker because nobody is interested to listen to him. They have kind of chased, like go to home, look after the managing the traffic, managing the transport or something like that. So maybe they have for this digital mode, we have some advantages. Maybe you are from your home and you do not have much of your hurry or something like that. In line with this BE, what I said, government also enrolled, or there are some bodies who were actually in line with the compliance of the building energy conservation scenario. One was GRIHA, that is, its full name is Green Rating for Integrated Habitat Assessment, Green Building Council, and it is the continuation of USGBC, United States Green Building Council, and later on this ECBC. And every year, maybe every alternate year or something, ECBC, they comes up with the new guidelines. What will be the, in the first stage in 2007, I remember ECBC, they came up with any commercial building which has a connected load of 500 kilowatt or 600 kVA, they need to do the mandatory energy audit. So over the years, in maybe 13 years gone, over the years, they are changing the their guidelines, their requirement, their ethics, like, and also probably if you go to buy a fridge or AC air conditioner, you'll get the star rating, like 3-star, 4-star. And that was one of the best job the BE has done so far in terms of green rating system. Like every time if you say, okay, it is 4-star, there it is mandatory to give you the yearly energy conservation, yearly energy consumption by the gadget. Say for you are buying a LED TV, they will say 60 watt, 60 unit per year. So that's a good choice for the customers. Today, in the world of smartphone, everybody needs in their hand that what if I buy this, my electricity bill will be 10 rupees multiplied by 60 units. So that is the ease of doing things, I feel personally. So the approaches is definitely, I think they're timely, they were need of the hour, and that's good. In terms of solar, the governmental initially in the time of UPA government, initially it was by 2022 the government should focus on 20 gigawatt of power. So under the leadership of our then Prime Minister Dr. Manmohan Singh said that 20 gigawatt, that's 20,000 megawatt by 2022. Later on, after 2014, when this NDA government came, they said after consulting with so many market research reports by KPMG, PwC, or so many others are there, so all big four, they recommended that it should be increased up to 100 gigawatt of power, 100 gigawatt. So look, from 20 gigawatts to 100 gigawatt. So my point was, this is unprecedented COVID, right? So nobody thought of it. So governmental targets and everything that will change. The world has changed. World has come to the reset mode. So you said what I'll talk about, the government said that it will be the 20,000 megawatt of solar park. So with this 100 gigawatts, means I said 100,000 megawatt, they divided like this way: 20,000 should be in the solar park. For the unemployed graduate, they introduced the people who are from NGOs or from small rural groups. So I forget the names. Like so many groups are there in Bengal, in other part of the country. So they are clubbed into this. If they apply from the MNRE, so if anybody from that group is looking at this video, looking at this session, so I encourage you to apply for this, and government has a website, that's mnre.gov.in. You enter into that, and there is a specific notification for this particular segment, that for the NGOs, unemployed graduate, or some group from rural youth group or something like that. So they can be clubbed to this. And 20,000 megawatt, this is for the state generation company. Say for renewable purchase obligation, probably some of you know. So most say after this 2003 this reform of electricity board, initially it was said that this is the entire electricity board. Now they have because of the foreign investment or the investment friendly climate, the government has changed into every electricity company has been fragmented into three. One is generation company, one is distribution company, one is transportation company. So now all that state DISCOM who is selling the power to you, like for us it is CESC, for who are from the Bengal, they are saying WBSCB. So their DISCOM unit, so they are responsible for installing this 20,000 megawatt by 2020. This is India-wide situation. So in this regard, every state has a renewable purchase obligation. Every DISCOM has a purchase obligation. What is that? So out of that renewable purchase obligation, say for in Gujarat, some part of Gujarat, that is hugely wind energy installation has been done in a huge part of Rajasthan. So that's why, so if you consider the entire gamut of this renewable energy purchase obligation, so they have wind. So for Bengal, we do not have much wind, maybe 2 megawatt or something like that. So in that case, say for, if I say every year there is a 0.5%, so over the 10 years it becomes 5%, right? So if my consumption today is somewhere around 1000 1000 GWH, gigawatt or something like that. So 5% of that is huge amount. So in 2016-17, I remember I was working with this for a small project with this Power Board of Bengal. So that time they had the obligation. This is typically the obligation. So since we have a democracy, sometimes what we do, because the governmental, that is the challenge of the federal government, that maybe some state may not comply their obligations. So, but they have the obligation. This is by the CERC, because CERC, Central Electricity Regulatory Commission, is there, and out of that, the State Electricity Regulatory Commission. So they mentor this, that how much solar you have so far installed. So what I said, all the DISCOMs, like who are from Bardhaman, who are from other part of Bengal, who are from Rajasthan, who are from Gujarat, so their DISCOMs are responsible for this much of renewable installation. So one out, and another is 40,000 megawatts of solar rooftop. One account I can, in 2007-8, while we were in Germany, that time only Germany reached that 40 gigawatt of solar rooftop installation. So every roof has a solar installation. So nowadays, because of the governmental willingness and the governmental huge target, the India is doing it very rapidly. And if we go, since this is a very generalized conference, and we should speak on this generalized version, like what is the target, this, because this, with respect to solar rooftop, there are three prominent versions, like CAPEX model, OPEX model, and there's the hybrid model. What is capital in? So if anybody is really interested to go forward, so they can ping to any company, anybody, just Google search, and any company, they can find the appropriate partner to go with the solar rooftop installation. So 40,000 solar rooftop, I'm telling you, government was 100 gigawatt. Up to this month, the government so far 35 gigawatt. That is huge, because this was unimaginable. The solar growth in India and the solar price in 2008, those who are from outside the country, since I'm saying in Indian rupees, so 24 crore per megawatt. So you can divide it by 75 rupees, so that you can understand that how much. So the per watt was 150 rupees. Can you imagine, nowadays solar power is 15 rupees, 50, so sub-dollar. So 1/5 of $1 per watt of solar power. So those people, some of the businesses who started very early and who has a very long-term negotiation, they are wiped out from the market because of this situation. So nowadays, the companies who were in the MSME sector, they were doing good because of the governmental huge boost. But the COVID has changed the situation completely and brutally affected the MSME sector. MSME sector is totally gone, because, and even though the government has started giving huge amount of subsidy and stimulus in different way, but still I personally think, like from the ILO's report, say for some 2 billion small medium companies will be wiped out after this pandemic. So if anybody has a question, you can check with ILO's website, and the companies typically range from 2 to 50 people. So these micro industries, they are thoroughly wiped out. So in coming to the point, the Indian target and the sustainability. So 100 gigawatt, so 100,000 megawatt. So how far we have reached? That is 35. So these are the solar technologies. Those who are from the field, they will find it very rudimentary by the color differentiation. The technology, they will be understanding monocrystalline, poly, and thin film. And these are the fourth power generation. This is one of the most important factor, like desert area, Middle East and North Africa. there is huge installation in Morocco, Spain, and ladies and gentlemen, I am going late. I'm extremely sorry. So I'll stop it here. And rooftop solar advantage, this you'll be knowing. And for technologies now, within next 3 minutes, I'll complete it. Another important thing, since we are a startup with this EV electric vehicle, so these are the drivers for growth of EV in India, and this is the global scenario. I'll show you the electric vehicle country-wise goal, like Amsterdam, that is zero emission transport by 2025, Tianjin new vehicles by 2020, but because of COVID. And my last point, I have noted few points, because government is saying this COVID as the force measure, like companies who has the last date, so they can consider this as a force measure. And working capital cycle is thoroughly gone. Most of the small industries in there brutally affected. That's what I said. MNRE said that okay, you can get the MNRE means the Ministry of New Renewable Energy. They said that okay, you can go ahead with the extension, but you need to apply. 3 months moratorium is given by the Reserve Bank of India. This is a positive sign. Deep decline power requirement, and all the DISCOMs, means generating companies, those who were working on 99% PLF, now they need to stop it, because there is no industrial requirement. Most of the industry has stopped apart from the FMCGs. So there is a deep decline in the power requirement. So they are in the hard job, huge loss. Punjab, UP, two states in India, they said we are unable to procure officially to the Ministry of Power and the Government of India. AP, Andhra Pradesh and Madhya Pradesh, they are said that we are unable to pay the generators, RE generators, renewable energy generators. Loss of investor confidence because their loan amount has hugely gone up. So this is a huge shock for the renewable energy players throughout the globe. And Indian solar industry particularly, 80% of the import, if I'm wrong, somebody can challenge me, 80% of the imports from the China because of this pandemic and the trade embargo or something like that, that is hugely affected. And lastly, only positive hope so far I can see that government has said that the places or the states and the areas which are not in the containment zone, they can carry out their renewable energy installation. This is only the I said silver lining in this difficult time. So thank you very much. Thank you panelists for joining, and participants. I must congratulate you for bearing us, and Team Curiosity. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, sir. Before you end the session, I would just have the questions from our viewers for you.
Okay. Please go ahead.
We have a question for you from Mr. Debashish Acharya. How badly is the renewable energy sector affected due to COVID, and what are the circumstances going to be in India after China being banned in several sectors, and Indian government taking such kind of calls to ban China and Chinese goods to be imported to India, sir?
Yes, Mohit, that's an excellent question. That's what I was saying in my last point, that so far panels, even solar cell, you consider about the cell. First thing is cell. Most of the companies in West Bengal, say for Bikram Solar, they are mostly they are buying the cells from the China before this pandemic issue and trade embargo. So if 80% of the solar sales are from China, so look their situation, because government has fully stopped. So even most of the companies, those who are in this typically green zone, say for what zone that is called, so these companies are almost unable to run the show, because they are saying the government stimulus is required, renewable energy stimulus. I can quote you one of CEO from Bikram Solar and some CEOs from Adani Solar. They gave the official statement that we need the stimulus because we cannot import sales from China. Because in terms of cost, nobody can compete with China so far in the renewable sector. I'm telling you with guarantee. So say for some, when we started in 2007-8, the sales we used to take from Taiwan. Even that, for the solar industry, what happens? You need to take the wafer and put the cell on. Okay. So this is so sorry. You need to take the wafer and make a cell on it. Say for the wafers, most of the companies that time, what they did the long-term agreement with the provider. They said we not go for that. That is their strategic policy. Their strategy that we not go for the 1 year. We cannot supply if you do it for 1 year. Say you need to do it for 5 years. Now because of the silicon price fall, it from $15,000 to suddenly it is $1/10, $150. If I'm so 1/10 or $1,500. So it's from 150 watt P to 1/5 of a dollar. Look the changes. So now renewable industry, so they are saying that okay, sell from China, it is cost efficient. Now you make the model, you sell. So Mr. Acharya, thank you very much for the beautiful questions. I must say that the situation is very bleak. Say for all the small and medium industries, those who are in the EPC field, basically EPC field is directly dependent on the manufacturer of the panels. This panel industry is not going to survive unless and until government gives a separate incentive for this panel manufacturers. Okay, so if the panel manufacturers does not survive, so these small and medium players will not survive. So their loan amount will increase and increase, continuously increase. So look their rating situation. Since Mohit, you are from this field of CSCS, so you'll be knowing that how rating matters in terms of getting your loans. So if you don't get loan, how can you do it? From your own pocket, you will do that. So in general, I think this is a major threat for the renewable industry. So government, I understand that government is so far giving MSME loan, MSME boost, and more for the food industry. I'm not sure for the other industry as well, but typically government need to give some boost for the small medium industry, those who in the installation, say for EPC contractors and the manufacturers. And government need to make a conducive environment. Say for solar thermal issue, Mr. Acharya, I am telling you, for the last 30 years, the government never tried. All the solar water heating systems, they are from China. The government has the capability, Indian engineers has the capability to do that. Because of the congenial atmosphere, they never did it seriously. Even the Indian companies, if they tell you that, okay, I'm the solar thermal manufacturer, they buy it from China. Why? Because I think this is kind of policy paralysis. This is not a political thing or something like this. This is kind of policy paralysis. Government need to rethink about this. This is the solar heating industry I'm talking about. The next one is the solar thermal energy, that is CSP, concentrated solar power. Look, all the deserts, even in the first phase, 570 megawatt of power was given to Indian industry, like Reliance got one, Divakar Solar they got, all are 100 megawatt. After that, government has stopped because the parabolic types concentrated solar system, all the type, there are 4 types of power generation in solar concentrating solar power system, because no supplier is there, no indigenous supplier is there. Why government is failing to do that? Because this is a common question. Like new generation people who are a little bit older, so new generation, they need to ask this: why government is failing to make it? Because the corporate sector is not interested to generate. Instead of they are doing it, they are buying it. So this self-reliant India, I say, I must say kudos if really India can rely on every aspect like solar, like Poland. Last from the Europe TV, I saw that Poland is saying we're not going to buy. They are coming up with a new solar policy. They said that okay, we are for the time being, we'll be buying the solar cell. We'll be manufacturing solar cell with some incentive. So this, if I am wrong, maybe some respected speakers are from Scholar.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you so much, sir. We have another question. Priyanka, could you please highlight the second question in front of sir?
Yes, yes, sure. So, sir, we have one more question. The question is that could you please tell us something about solar cars?
Solar cars. Solar cars, Priyanka, this is kind of very interesting features because in last 10 years it
And
has been in the mostly in the R&D phase.
and
So
sir,
far,
can
solar
they be
cars you
used
said,
in
solar cars
forest
you said.
safaris?
Why I cannot? Should I stop
Yes,
this?
sir. And can they be used as forest safaris?
So should I cut it? Zoom. Okay, okay, I can get it. So you said.
So you're audible.
Sir, basically the question is regarding the solar sector coming in the field of vehicles in India, sir. And one of the major thing that Mr. Adhikari has asked is that how do you link the solar cars with the forest safari and forest tourisms and all, sir? Is it better idea to bring in solar cars for solar jeeps for the tourist for touring the forest safaris and all, sir?
Yes. Thank you, Mohit, for explaining the question. The first of all, solar car, this is technically feasible, scientifically tested. This is feasible because the speed of photon. Initially, the scientists were said that with respect to the speed of the car, maybe there will be some changes in the radiation level. Say for in normally in the on the Earth surface we get say for 650 watt per meter square. In Rajasthan we get around 800 to 900 watt per meter square, this much of radiation. So if a solar car moves, so will there be any fluctuation of the radiation? Because you need to charge your car, right, with the solar radiation. So technically this is feasible, but with due respect from all the scientists and all, scientific community in India, so far it's not the uh, prototype has not been tested in India. So maybe Tata's, Mahindra, these are all big companies, they are bigger than the even multinational companies. So they are all testing it. But the second part, you said for the safari and this thing, this is very much possible. Say for one participant I see, you are the speaker, Dr. Sir Penisky.
Sir, one more last question that you could link with this
Okay, that is
particular
feasible.
topic only, sir.
Just let me complete. So there will
Okay,
be a
sir.
charging point. So the safari where you are starting it, so there will be a charging point. No need to use conventional grid. So that is very much feasible, Mahit. For the technology and other thing, you can search or anybody can search. So thank you for the question. That's a beautiful question.
Sir, one more last question to end up the session, sir. We have one question from Dr. Mir. He is asking, how do we link up the solar energy with the tourism industries? Is there any possibility to link up the solar energy platform with the tourism industry, sir?
Okay, Mohit, who is asking this?
Dr. Mir, sir. Dr. Mir.
Oh, Dr. Mir Abdul. Thank you, Professor, for asking the question. And okay, that is very much possible because UNWTO, United Nations World Tourism Organization, they have a separate island tourism or something like that. So that is taken maybe in 2012 or 13. They said the island tourism, every island throughout the world, maybe some million islands. I do not have idea. Maybe you will be knowing. So all these islands will purely run on solar energy. How? Because take the case of Sundarban. Sundarban, say about 10 years back, there was no grid. Now they have a maybe hybrid grid or something. So that time they are using solar power fully. So it is possible because of the cost, only the economies of scale. Because of the cost, everything, every island can be this thing. And the tourism industry, say for to every hotel, there is a LEED certification, that is leadership and energy and environment design. So what is that? You need to install certain amount of solar energy. Say for any hotel industry, if come up with 100% solar, that is also technically feasible. You don't need to, even the solar is a better grid than conventional grid. I am telling you, Dr. Mir Abdul. So this is feasible. Still, the people who have the money, the businessmen, they are not so convinced. So this is very much feasible. And thank you for a beautiful question. Mohit, go ahead. Priyanka, go ahead.
Thank you so much, sir. I thank both our eminent speakers. They have wonderfully taken up the session and addressed our questions in a very insightful manner. And I'm sure that these will be taken into account whenever we are at a to provide some such. Thank you so much, sir.
I, on
Thank you.
behalf
Thank
of
you,
the
everybody.
entire team, wants to give a vote of thanks to both of you, sir. I, on behalf of all the team members and the people who were behind the scene preparing for this session since last 2-3 days on full-fledged mode, Priyanka, Rupanjana ma'am, and everyone. And also to Dr. Nandi, who has elaborated the session in a very practical way. Even a layman could understand everything properly. And Mr. Saurav, who had highlighted the capital market scenario along with the current economic developments going on. Thank you so much, sir. Thank you to all the members present here, all the viewers. We will be meeting tomorrow with the new speakers and new moderators. Thanks a lot.
Thanks, Mohit. You've done a wonderful job. Priyanka, you too. So see you all tomorrow at 10. We have a very good session at right at 10 with three very good speakers. So have a nice evening and let's meet tomorrow in the morning. Good night.
Good night.
Thank you. Thank you very much.